Welcome everybody. Today we are going to be decorating some cookies. It is a Tutti Frutti theme. I'm looking forward to it.
Oh yeah.
So, we need some supplies that don't come in the box we give you. So I would grab some paper towels, a pair of scissors, some toothpicks. Definitely wash your hands before you do this because we're gonna be touching cookies a lot, right? Okay. So,
You might also want to cover your surface. We have some parchment paper, but just cookie decorating can get a little messy, and then it makes cleanup easier.
great, yeah, any sheet, any towel you want to use.
So grab that stuff, and then when you're ready, let's open the cookie kit.
So, when you open it, you're going to see a practice sheet, all your icing, the uniced sugar cookies, some spare bags, and then this little container of chocolate chips. So today we're going to start with the practice sheet. And this is so we can figure out how to handle the bag, how thick we should cut it. I'm gonna start with grain, any color you want. We're just practicing. So when
I
you,
think it's always good to start with a warm up.
yeah, it's warm up. We're stretching, right?
So then our cookies will be ready to just make awesome cookies.
So, I cut it probably, what would you say that is, like a millimeter? Just keep it thin because we want it to hold its shape. And if we got it too thick, it'll start flowing a bit too much because we're just gonna be outlining here. So I've got a pretty thin width here.
Yeah, just enough to cover up the lines on your practice sheet.
Right. And I'll be going through all of these shapes with you. So when you decorate, you can hold it however is most comfortable with you. Some people hold it similar to a pencil, one hand. I always recommend using two hands. I use my non-dominant hand to squeeze at the top and my dominant hand to sort of steer my way through what I'm working on. You can do it the opposite of that. You can feel it out, test it out, pause the video if you need to, and give it a go. But once you find that perfect hold, then if you want to practice these with me, I'll start at the top where it's a little simpler. And you never really want to touch the surface with the bag. See that I'm, sort of floating above here. And when I want to stop my line, all I do is push down a bit and pull up. And that might be the only time you're actually touching the surface with your icing. With your icing bag, I mean.
It just kind of helps the icing stop flowing out.
Right.
So you'll stop squeezing at the end and then kind of push down and pull up.
Alright, got some straight lines here, not too bad. Good warm up.
And if your icing is kind of stopping as along the line you're seeing some breaks in it, it might just be that the bag is cut a little too thin, so you might need to trim it a little bit more.
Right.
So the icing flows out in a solid stream.
The shape is a little trickier. Any curved surfaces are always going to be a little harder to follow. And it is difficult when it's just outline. I don't know if you have this problem, Hannah, but when it's just outline, a lot of times it'll look a lot, it doesn't always look as good, but then once you flood it and detail it, you can really notice those outlining mistakes you might have made.
Yeah, cookies are just a fun thing to decorate, but even if you feel like you're not doing a perfect job, by the end they come out so fun once everything is put together.
Right.
So just keep practicing, do your best, and we're gonna make some great cookies. We're not really trying to be perfect, but
It's more just
having fun and being creative.
getting the handle down too. With this, you don't need to be perfectly on the line. It's just getting used to this bag.
Circles are definitely the hardest shape. So if yours are not looking perfect, don't worry about it. It's good to practice. But circles, for some reason, are just the
Circles
hardest
are
shape
tough.
to follow.
We all struggle with circles a little bit here. Alright, do
But-
this last heart here.
Hopefully you're getting all warmed up, you're getting used to how the icing feels and how it comes out of the bag. And if you want to keep doing more practicing, just pause the video right here and get some more practicing in, and then we will next get our cookies out. Okay, so our practicing is all done. Now let's open up those cookies and see if you can guess what these shapes are.
Some of them are a little simpler, I'd say, but I don't know, I feel like there are a couple that could give me a hard time.
Yeah.
If I didn't already see the end goal.
If you need scissors, you can grab some scissors and cut the cookies out of the bags. But we have all these fun fruit shapes. This here is going to be a pear. This one is an apple. We also have a banana. This is little cherries. These are so cute. That's my favorite. And then we have some big cookies, big pineapple.
And last but not least, everyone's summertime favorite, the watermelon.
A little slice of watermelon. So get your cookies out. We're gonna put those in front of you. And the decorating happens like in 3 steps. We outline all of the shapes. That's kind of telling the color where it's gonna go. And then flood, and then we do all the detailing, the fun detailing last. So we're gonna start with just getting all the outlining done.
So I'm gonna grab my red now. You can do this in any order, but I'm gonna start with the apple, I think. It's the safest option. Everybody loves an apple. I'll cut my red as sort of the same as I just did for that practice sheet. Right? So, and just like how we practiced with our outlining, I'm not gonna touch the cookie. And I usually start at one of the breaking points if it's rounded like this. So either down here or up here. So I'm not starting in the middle of a curve. And then I'll come back around here. Bring this curve around, and we're going to save some space at the top so we can put on the little stem and the leaf, which I will use this green for.
In the outlining stage, you're just kind of deciding which large areas of color you want.
Right. So you have to sort of imagine a line coming up too, because sometimes the lines aren't always there. So I picture the leaf coming up like that. Then I'll grab this little brown we have in here. Same thing, cut it pretty thin.
And you're going as close as you can to the edge of the cookie without the icing falling off.
Right. So I just filled in the rest of that space with my brown there. And we'll let that sit for a little while before we flood. So that is the apple. I'm going to scooch that over just a little. And from there, I'm going to move on to the pineapple, I think.
And you can pick any color choices you want, but if you want, we're gonna just show you how to do it like in the example photo.
Right. If you want a red pineapple or a yellow apple, then that is perfectly fine.
So in outlining stage, you're setting like the foundation for how your cookies are gonna look. So if you ever like make any mistakes, or like if the icing, maybe you don't like how it's looking, it's really easy to just grab a toothpick and just swipe the icing right off.
Right. For example, if I want to redo this little spot here where it sort of clumps together, I can just scrape that off, clean it up a bit, and come back in so it's not so... It was a little uneven there and it was bothering me.
It's really easy to make changes in this point, so take your time and get the cookies outlined exactly how you want them.
I'll toss some leaves on top. These are kind of fun to do. I like sort of jagged, sharp shapes like this. They're just fun to outline, fun to flood. And I'm still just following the outline but staying on the cookie because you don't want to go too far off, because then when you're flooding it might make it easier for the cookie to overflow, which we do not want. It can be saved, but it's a bit of a hassle. So from here, I will switch this out with my banana. Alright, and this one is just going to be all yellow. Unless you want to use different colors, which you can. And I think I'm gonna start here because I'll leave some space at the top for a bit of brown. These bananas have those, I guess, stems, would it be?
I guess.
I don't know, banana stem. I guess I'll go ahead and outline that now. And it's just a little, sort of like the same shape that was on the top of the apple. It's just a small brown stem. That one's pretty simple. And now I'm gonna do these little cherries.
You'll notice he keeps moving the cookies kind of out of the way when they're done outlining. It's just easier to work with. You kind of have more control over the icing and less likely to make mistakes if the cookie is really close to you.
Yeah, because if I'm trying to decorate out here, it's a little harder to have control over it, like Hannah said, so I try and keep it right in front of me. These ones, I think you're given a little more freedom. You can sort of make whatever kind of shape you want because there's no set shape for these cherries. So I'll do a rough, uneven circle. And I like them to be slightly touching just a bit, like so. And then from there, I think I'm gonna go ahead actually and add the little stem and leaf top. So I'll make a couple lines like so. And another little stem coming off. Like I said, this one does have a bit more, I think, room for imagination. You can sort of add a leaf wherever you want. You can add stems. It's personal preference from here.
Yeah, you can kind of decide there's some parts of the cookie that we're not covering up with icing, and you can just kind of decide how much icing you want to put on that.
And I'm gonna do these watermelon now. These ones are a big hit in our case, I think. We have watermelons in the case a lot over the summer, and people seem to love them. So we're gonna start with that, what do you call this part of the watermelon?
The rind?
The rind, yeah. I almost said crust. I'm gonna start with the watermelon crust, like it's a pizza. And I'll do that green. Again, you don't need to, but staying true to what watermelons really look like, I'll do green. And then come in with my red and sort of fill in the last bit of that triangle there. Like so. And last is the pear, which is probably the simplest outline because I'm just going to use green, and the detailing later on is a lot of fun because it gets marbling where it's a lot of wet on wet icing and it mixes together really well. But for now, I'm going to keep it simple and just make this whole thing green.
Okay, so the outlining step is all done. Okay, so now it's time to start the second step of decorating, which is flooding. This is where we're just gonna cover the cookie in icing and fill in all the color.
Yeah, it's like coloring in the page of a coloring book, I think.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna cut all my bags a little wider. I'll just do it all at the same time so then they're ready. So nothing crazy, but we don't need to outline anymore. So
It'll just help the icing come out a little bit faster to fill in all those cookie spaces.
right.
You also want to have your toothpicks ready at this stage, and also make sure you have your sprinkles, your little chocolate chips. We'll have that ready because we'll put those on during this stage.
Right. So I like to go in order of how I outlined, just so it gives the outlining a little more time to dry. So I started with the apple here when I outlined, so I'm going to start with that flooding as well. So I'll grab my red, or whichever color you used, and usually when I flood, I'll do a rough, I will roughly follow the outline I made of this shape and fill it in like so. And then you just sort of blend it together. And you can start in the middle if that works for you. I might do a couple different techniques just so you guys can see a bit of variety, but that's usually how I outline most of my shapes. And I'm spreading it around, trying to keep it even, and it naturally settles pretty evenly as long as there's enough icing in the cookie.
Yeah, if it has too many, you don't want any of the cookie showing. So you're just kind of squeezing icing out.
Yeah, notice how I'm pushing it to the edge with my bag. You can use a toothpick for this instead if that's preferable to you, but I like to use my icing bag so then I can keep a little bit of icing coming out. I'm not squeezing, it just sort of naturally flows out on its own. And I'm getting it to the edge over here so we don't have any open spaces.
The toothpick can help too if it's like getting in some tight spaces. You can just use it to drag the icing wherever you want it to go.
Or if you notice any air bubbles, it helps spread icing around so you get those out of there. If there's any peaks like this, I might just swirl it around a bit, put that down, and it gives us a pretty smooth surface. And I'm going to grab my green now. And just, same thing with this leaf, it's a lot quicker, obviously, it's a much smaller portion of the shape. And same thing, I'm just sort of pushing it to the edges.
And if your icing's like really lumpy or there's cookie showing, then it might just mean you need a little bit more icing.
Right.
And if you get too much icing, which happens sometimes,
We'll
the icing might go over the edge and start overflowing. If that happens, don't worry about it and don't panic. It's actually best to just kind of leave it alone and let it overflow. And once it dries a little bit, it's really easy to use a toothpick to just scrape it off. So don't worry about it. If it starts overflowing, it might just mean you have a little bit too much icing.
All right, I went ahead and filled up that stem there, and I'm now going to move on to my pineapple. This one, same thing. I'll start in the middle this time, just to change things up, show you guys some different varieties of how I might flood, because I need to change it up every once in a while. We flood a lot of cookies here, and sometimes you need to try new things. A lot of times I'll sort of like make a circle starting on the inside going out and just keep spiraling around that.
This is a big cookie, so you're going to need a lot of
Yeah.
icing on this one.
Yes, this one does take a bit more. But same concept. I'm just going to bring it to the edges. Try not to push too hard so I don't get any overflows.
But it's so cool how icing just like as you keep moving it around, it just starts getting smoother and smoother and covering up all the cookie. It's so fun.
I think it's therapeutic sometimes. Coming in here and being able to flood. It's like a time to meditate, Alright, clean up some of those messy spaces. And go ahead and add the leaves on the top. And as Hannah mentioned earlier, those toothpicks can come in handy for some tighter spots. So if you don't feel entirely comfortable flooding all the way to the top of these leaves where it sort of narrows a bit, then it's perfectly fine to even stop around here maybe and just push the rest of the icing up with a toothpick. I'm going to try and just use the tip of my bag. I'll get all that sort of outline flooding done first and then move on to the inside. And same things, I'm constantly moving the bag so the icing...
It smooths it out.
Yeah, it smooths it out.
As you move the bag around and it gets it nice and even. All over the cookie.
Sometimes if icing sits for even a few seconds, when you get back to it, it might already be starting to harden. So moving it around in those sort of swirly motions sometimes prevents that. And I'll fix those little peaks, those blemishes, if you will. Alright, and now I'll grab my yellow again, do this banana. This is kind of a fun shape to do, I think. I'm going to start in the middle again and just sort of like I'm making outlines of the shape inside of it. Once I get a pretty good portion of it filled, same as I have been doing, I'm just going to swirl this around.
And we're not really worrying about any of the like details. You can't really put a lot of stuff in while it's wet because the details would just sink right into it. So we're just creating like a base of color. And it might not look very fun yet, but
we're getting there. And just so you guys know, if a cookie is going to overflow, it's a lot more likely that it overflows where there's a curve. So this banana, for example, mine is close to the edge there, and it looks like it wants to overflow. So anywhere on a cookie where there's any curvature, it's sort of more likely to have a bit of a spill. But so far, this one's looking okay. I'm gonna fix those little peaks there. And the finishing touch on this banana, I'll just fill in that stem. And I didn't cut my brown because it really only needs to flood in a couple tiny spaces, so I'm not worried about it. Alright, so there are the first three. And
we're going to carefully move the cookies now so you can be flooding the ones the closest to your body. So just really carefully slide.
Yeah, slide it if you can, if you have space for it. And if
really
you're picking
carefully
it up,
so you don't mess up the hard work that you've done.
Alright, so I'm going to start with the cherries because these two shapes actually get a little bit of finessing. They get some wet on wet work. They're probably the hardest to flood, so I'm going to save those for last. Cherries, relatively simple, just little small circles. I'll start on the inside and sort of swirl it around. That's how I like to flood any circular shape. And then with my green, I'm just going to fill in this little leaf here. Similar to the one on the apple. Okay, so for this next shape, this is where things get interesting. We are going to be doing some detailing while it's still wet. So I need you to have your handy dandy cup of chocolate chips here, and those are going to be our watermelon seeds. So I'm going to flood it normally, like we have been. Just sort of follow the outline, fill it in. I probably could have cut this a little bit wider, but here we are.
And when you put any kind of sprinkles into the icing right away when it hasn't dried, it'll act like a glue to just hold the chocolate chips in there.
And then these ones will also have a bit of extra flavor because you're getting vanilla and chocolate. So I'm just gonna use them sparingly. You know, I'll put a few here, a few there. If you want, you can dump the entire thing on if you're a big chocolate fan. But I'm going to stay true to what watermelons look like naturally in nature. But
oh, I wish watermelon really did have chocolate seeds though.
Oh, can you imagine? Okay. I'll add one more here for good measure. Alright. So that's that. And then the rind part, or crust, if you will. I'm going to cut my green and just fill it in normally. And this shape is actually done after this because we usually leave the green part of the watermelon just plain like this. If you want to add any fun detailing that you can come up with, then that is perfectly fine. But for now, I'm just going to leave that as it is. And the final shape, this one is fun because it doesn't just get flooded one plain color. I am going to flood most of it with this green here, but then go in right afterwards and get some yellow in, and I'm going to use my toothpick to blend it in and sort of give it a marbly look. That's what we call it here. We call it marbling. So what I like to do when I am doing wet on wet is I'll sort of get the border outlined with my flood, since I'm not really going to be marbling out there. And once all of this is filled in, I'm going to go in and add just some random lines in here. I'm not worried about filling it in completely right now, because then I'm going to go in with my yellow and sort of do the same thing. Just random lines here and there. And once both of those are down, that's when I get my toothpick and sort of swirl it around. Almost like you're making like giving it a tie-dye sort of look. And this one's fun because the green and the yellow mixing actually sort of gives us a third color, which is something we don't get in any of our other shapes. So I'm going to try and mix that in pretty well. A lot of swirls.
And it gives it that cool look that pears are like, they're never really one color. It's like they have a mix of yellow and green.
Yeah, so feel free to use whatever color. I don't know if you guys outlined this in a different color, but you have the artistic choice to flood it however you'd like. But I chose to go with green and yellow. And I think I'm going to stop there.
All right. So, pause here if you need to finish up your flooding, but our flooding stage is done. So now we're going to take a little break and let this dry a little bit. The details will go on better if it's kind of like crusted over, so the details won't sink in. So take a little break, let it dry, and we'll be right back to finish up the cookies.
Welcome back, everybody. I think we've had enough time to let this dry. I gave it like 30, 40-ish minutes. Once you see that shine gone, you know, like when you first flood it, it sort of has this shiny, glazy look. Now it's more of like a matte. So that means it's dry and ready for detailing. So we have all our icing, but it's all cut a little bit thick for flooding. And if you look in the boxes that your guys' kits came in, you'll see 2 extra piping bags. That's what we call these, they're piping bags. So if you want to take these out, I am going to re-bag my green and my yellow. So I'll show you how to do that.
You can pick whatever colors you want, but the detailing that we're gonna do from the demo photo, we're gonna need skinnier green and yellow.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, if you want to use red or something instead, that's fine. I kept my brown skinny cut from the beginning, so I don't have to rebag that. But, so what I'm going to do is, I'm going to squeeze the icing out of the tip. Like so. So it's sort of empty up there. It's a cleaner look. So then I can grab it, and I squeeze my icing down. Not everyone does this. Sometimes you can just cut the entire tip of the bag off, but I like moving it down. It's just less mess.
And then you can save more of the icing too.
Right. So I'm going to cut all of that off. So it's a pretty big gap there. And then what I do is I open up my spare bag, put this in, make sure I fold it so I can squeeze the icing out, and then pull out this empty bag. And I will toss that out. Then usually we have a bag taper here that we can sort of put these through, but if you don't have a bag taper, which I'm assuming you don't, then you can use a rubber band, some sort of clip. I'm just going to tie this, and it's a little tricky because they're smaller bags. So I'll just give it a little knot there. And it doesn't have to be crazy tight, just enough so that none of the icing is, you know, leaking out onto your hand, because that has happened here quite a few times and it's not comfortable. So I think that's good for the green. And you don't even have to do another one if you want to do all your detailing in one color, but I am going to do 2. So same thing here. Move my icing down, prevent mess, any spills. Cut off the top. And my spare bag. Same thing, squeeze and pull, squeeze and pull. And then twist and tie.
In some of these cookies, they actually might already be done.
Yes, I think they are.
Because we put some fun stuff in while you in the like outlining and flooding stage, but we'll put some little details on some of these cookies to just make them so perfect and yummy. My favorite cookies, I love cookies of foods. I don't know why I think
love
they're
food
so
cookies.
like these fruit cookies.
Like the
I don't know why.
watermelon.
Yeah,
It's
looks
making
so
me
good.
hungry. And I think the watermelon is actually done because we got the sprinkled chocolate chips on.
Yeah, it already looks like
Yeah.
a slice of watermelon. I think maybe if you want to put anything on the cherry, you could, but I don't really think there's much left to do with that.
Yeah, I was gonna. Yeah.
We'll just put some little things on. But this is also the stage where you can just let your creativity go wild and just anything you want to add to these.
So I'm gonna show you what we usually do here, my personal preference, but you don't have to do this exact same thing. So, like we did, going back to the outlining stage, I'm gonna cut these pretty thin. So just give it a little opening because we don't want it too fat because then it's gonna flow a bit too much. Alright. And again, watch those icing bag tips because those can come out of nowhere and you might find them in your cookie later on, which we don't want. So with my skinny grain now, this detailing is very simple. I'm gonna leave the apple almost entirely as it is, but I just like to add a little bit of line, a center line, you know, leaves have those. And I'm just gonna leave it at that because I think there's beauty in simplicity, so I'm gonna leave that where it is. And then while I have this grain, I'm gonna go ahead and take it over to the pineapple. And you can do a similar thing like that if you want to bring lines up the middle, which I think I'll actually do. It's a little trickier, but makes things a bit more interesting, I think. And I'll give them some little curves just to make it, just to give it some spunk, some pizzazz, you know. And then I'm going to give it an outline as well. It's because some of my favorite orders that we do here have a lot of complex shapes mixed with a lot of very simple shapes, and that's always my favorite look. So I'm going to leave that where it is. And then with my yellow, go back to the pineapple, and I will do a sort of grid pattern. And it's easier for me if I start going diagonally from the middle, so one corner to one corner. And I'll go for 4 lines each way. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 here. And then from this side, I'm going to get the same design going. Try and get 4 in here again. And it's not always perfectly even, but it is what it is. And then I like, just because it's kind of fun, I don't think pineapples actually have this, but I like adding dots in the middle of those little, I guess diamond shapes it would be. Little squares here. Put them in the center just to give it more detail. Alright. And that is actually going to be everything for the pineapple. And then lastly with this yellow, on the banana, I think I'm just going to actually add 1 line. I'll start up here. Add 1 line in the middle here, sort of curving down, like following the outline, but staying on the inside. And I'm going to stop it short because I am going to be adding some more brown down here. And then, sort of same thing, just kind of outlining this.
Giving it those like ridges that a banana has.
Giving it a bit of depth. And now that that's done, I think I will go back in with my little brown now. And bananas have those sort of brown stems at each end, so I'm gonna just add a bit there. Make it look a bit more realistic. And now, that is the first 3 shapes. So these ones are all done. Again, if you guys want to keep adding detailing, that's perfectly fine. But this is where I'm going to stop for now. And from here, I will switch out these 3 shapes with the top shapes. Even though these 2 are already done, I think I'm just going to bring them down anyways. I'm going to give them a closer look. So these ones I will just leave plain because I like how this is looking with the seeds. Actually, on this cherry, I am going to add that little line like we did with the apple because I kind of like that look. So we'll give it a bit of curve. I think I'll leave that there. And the finishing touch on this entire kit that I'm going to do is one little stem on this pear. Just to give it a more realistic look, I think. So I'll sort of choose a point at the top. I don't think it's necessarily super important where exactly. I just make an odd rectangle, I guess it would be. I'll start near the top and bring it up to the edge and then leave it as it is. And
I think we're done.
I think we're done, yeah.
It's always so sad when you have to stop playing with them, but use your creativity, anything you want to add. We'd love to see what you come up with.
Yeah.
Make sure you tag us in social media, take pictures of what you've done and tag us so we can see. And come back again for another cookie kit.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.